Captain stood at attention in the gleaming throne room of the flagship, trying not to let his amazement show. The walls were made of some crystalline material that seemed to shift between blue and silver, and the ceiling stretched so high it disappeared into darkness. Around him, dozens of alien dignitaries from across the galaxy had gathered for what they called the bonding ceremony, essentially a diplomatic marriage market where alliances were sealed through arranged unions. Had been chosen to represent humanity not because he was particularly special, but because Earth was still considered a minor power in the galactic community. Humans had only made contact 5 years ago, and most species still saw them as curious primitives who had somehow stumbled into space travel. The fact that they'd been invited to this ceremony at all was considered a generous gesture by the more established civilizations. "The Terran delegation will now receive their diplomatic partner," announced the herald, a tall, blue-skinned being with 4 arms and eyes like liquid mercury. The crowd murmured with barely concealed amusement. Could hear the whispered comments in various alien languages, most of which his universal translator helpfully converted into snide remarks about humanity's backwater status. That's when she was brought forward. Princess of the Empire walked with her head held high, but could see the humiliation burning in her golden eyes. She was breathtakingly beautiful by any standard humanoid in appearance, but with an otherworldly grace that made her seem to glow from within. Her skin had a subtle silver sheen, and her long hair flowed like liquid starlight. Delicate patterns that looked like constellations marked her arms and face, shifting slowly as if they were actually moving stars. But could read the room. The other delegates were barely containing their laughter. This wasn't an honor, this was a joke. They were giving the failed princess to the human as a way of getting rid of both problems at once. "Princess," the herald continued, his voice dripping with false ceremony, "daughter of Emperor, has been chosen to bond with the human representative. May this union bring understanding between our peoples." The pause before understanding was telling, felt his jaw clench. He'd studied galactic politics enough to know what this meant. Among the fertility was everything. Their birth rates had been declining for centuries, and a princess who couldn't produce heirs was worse than useless. She was a reminder of their species' looming extinction. By all accounts, had every medical procedure, every ritual, every treatment their advanced civilization could provide. Nothing had worked. And now they were handing her off to a human, like some kind of consolation prize. Stepped forward and, to everyone's surprise, bowed deeply. Not the casual nod that humans usually gave to alien dignitaries, but a full, respectful bow that he'd learned was the highest form of greeting in culture. When he straightened, he looked directly into his eyes and spoke in carefully practiced. "Your Highness, I am honored beyond measure to meet you. I know this must be difficult, and I want you to know that I will treat you with the respect and dignity you deserve, regardless of what anyone else thinks appropriate." Blinked, clearly not expecting this response. Around the room, the murmurs died down. Most species couldn't even pronounce properly, let alone speak it with such careful formality. "You speak our language," she said softly, also in. "I've been studying for months, hoping I might be able to communicate properly with whoever I was paired with. I thought it would be disrespectful to rely entirely on translators for something this important." For the first time since entering the room's expression softened slightly. "That is unexpectedly thoughtful." The herald, clearly annoyed that his little show wasn't going as planned, clapped his hands sharply. "The ceremony will now conclude. The bonded pairs will retire to their assigned quarters aboard the diplomatic vessel. The union period will last for 1 standard galactic year, after which the partnerships will be evaluated for permanent status." As the crowd began to disperse, offered his arm. She hesitated for a moment, then took it with surprising grace. "I suppose we should talk," she said as they walked toward the exit. "I'd like that very much, Your Highness." "Please, I think we can dispense with formalities given the circumstances." Their assigned quarters were luxurious by human standards, a sprawling suite with separate bedrooms, a common area with a view of the stars, and amenities that couldn't even identify. Moved to the large window and stood with her back to him, her shoulders tense. "You know what this is, don't you?" she said without turning around. "You understand why they paired us." Moved to stand beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "I know they think you're infertile, and I know they consider humans to be beneath their notice. I'm guessing this was their idea of killing 2 birds with 1 stone." Let out a bitter laugh. How refreshingly direct. Yes, that's exactly what this is. I'm the broken princess and you're the primitive alien. They probably think it's hilarious. What do you think? She finally turned to look at him, studying his face with those remarkable golden eyes. I think you're not what I expected. Most species either treat me with pity or disgust once they learn about my condition. You seem genuinely unbothered by it. Shrugged, where I come from, a person's worth isn't determined by their ability to have children. Besides, from what I've read about culture, you're accomplished in your own right. Didn't you design the new environmental systems that saved 3 colony worlds from atmospheric collapse? Stared at him, you know about that. I told you I've been studying. I wanted to understand the cultures I might be dealing with. Your work was mentioned in several diplomatic briefs as an example of innovation. Most people only know about my fertility problems, she said quietly. Even my own people tend to forget everything else I've accomplished. Their loss, said simply. So what do we do now? We've got a year together whether we like it or not. We can spend it being miserable or we can try to make the best of it. What did you have in mind? Well, I was hoping you might be willing to teach me more about galactic technology. Earth is still playing catch-up, and I'd love to learn from someone who actually understands how all this works. In exchange, maybe I could tell you about human culture. Most aliens seem to think we're all violent primitives, but there's a lot more to us than that. Was quiet for a long moment. You're serious? You actually want to spend time with me? Why wouldn't I? You're clearly brilliant. You're interesting to talk to. And frankly, you're the only person in this entire galaxy who's bothered to have a real conversation with me since I got here. Something shifted in her expression, a wall coming down, perhaps. All right of Earth, let's see what we can learn from each other. Over the following weeks, their relationship began to evolve in ways neither had expected. Was indeed brilliant. Her understanding of advanced physics and engineering far exceeded anything humans had achieved. But more than that, she was curious about everything, asking endless questions about Earth's history, culture, and people. Your species is fascinating, she said one evening as they shared dinner in their quarters. Most civilizations become more refined as they advance. Conflicts become more civilized, emotions become more controlled. But humans seem to retain this raw intensity even as your technology improves. Is that a polite way of saying we're savages? Asked with a grin. No, it's a way of saying you're alive in a way that most of us have forgotten how to be. When you talk about your home, about the people you care about, there's a passion there that I haven't seen in any other species. What about, surely your people have passion? Smile faded slightly. We used to, but as our fertility declined, we became more and more focused on duty, on following the proper procedures to maximize our chances of reproduction. Passion became seen as wasteful, inefficient, a luxury we couldn't afford. That sounds exhausting. It is. Do you know what it's like to live your entire life knowing that your only value to your people is your ability to produce the next generation, and then to fail at even that? Reached across the table and gently covered her hand with his. The contact sent a strange, tingling sensation up his arm, something to do with physiology, he assumed. You are so much more than that, he said firmly. You're kind, intelligent, creative, and strong enough to endure treatment that would have broken most people. Anyone who can't see that is blind. Stared down at their joined hands, and noticed that the constellation patterns on her skin were shifting more rapidly than usual, taking on a warmer, golden hue. She said softly, "What if they're right? What if I really am broken?" "Then you're in good company," he said. "Half the human race considers me broken too. I've never been married, never had children, spend most of my time buried in books instead of socializing. My own family thinks I'm a lost cause." "But you're not broken, you're just different." "Exactly, and so are you." That night something changed between them. It wasn't romantic love, not yet, but it was something deeper than friendship. A recognition of kindred spirits who had both been discarded by their respective societies and found unexpected understanding in each other. The weeks turned into months, and their daily routines became comfortable, then cherished. Would wake early to study galactic politics and technology with materials that provided. She would spend her mornings working on various engineering projects, often explaining the principles to, who proved to be a surprisingly quick learner. Their afternoons were spent exploring the diplomatic vessel, which was essentially a small city in space. They visited the libraries, were introduced to literature from across the galaxy, and the observation decks, where pointed out constellations from Earth's sky and told her the stories behind them. "Your people see stories in the stars," observed one evening as they watched a nebula drift past. "Most species just see navigation points. Don't have myths about the constellations. We used to long ago, but they were deemed unproductive. Why tell stories about imaginary heroes when you could be studying star charts for colonization purposes?" Shook his head. "No wonder your birth rates are declining. You forgot how to dream." "What do you mean?" "Children are born from hope, from love, from the belief that the future can be better than the present. If all you're focused on is duty and efficiency, where's the inspiration to create new life?" Was quiet for a long time. I never thought of it that way. It was during their 4th month together that the dreams began. At first, didn't mention them, they were too strange, too personal. But the dreams became more vivid, more frequent, until she couldn't ignore them anymore. They were dreams of silver light and warmth, of two different energies coming together to create something new. She would wake feeling more alive than she had in years, her constellation markings glowing brighter than usual. When she finally told about the dreams, his reaction surprised her. "I've been having dreams too," he admitted. "Strange ones. It feels like something is trying to connect with me, but I can't quite understand what it wants." "Describe them to me." "Light mostly, and this sense of possibility, like something that's been waiting for a very long time is finally able to happen." His breath caught. "When you touch me, what do you feel?" "Warmth, tingling, like a very mild electrical current. I assumed it was normal for your species." "It's not, don't usually produce bioelectric fields strong enough for other species to detect." She was quiet for a moment, thinking. Unless what?" "There are old stories, from before we became so focused on medical interventions. Stories about bonds that transcended species, about connections that could create new possibilities." "You think that's what's happening to us?" "I think we might be more compatible than anyone realized, including ourselves." That night, they sat together on the couch in their common area, not quite touching but close enough to feel the energy that seemed to flow between them. The air around them shimmered slightly, and both could feel something building, not sexual tension, but something deeper and more fundamental. Said softly, "I need to tell you something. These past few months with you have been the happiest of my life. Not because of any potential romantic feelings, but because I've finally found someone who sees me for who I really am. I feel the same way. When I'm with you, I remember who I was before everyone started defining me by my failures. What if we tried something?" "What kind of something?" Took her hand, and immediately the tingling sensation increased tenfold. Around them, the air began to glow with a soft, warm light. "What if we stopped thinking about what everyone else expects and started thinking about what we want? Not just tonight, but for our future." Constellation markings began to pulse in rhythm with the light surrounding them. "I need you to understand something. If this goes wrong, if I disappoint you the way I've disappointed everyone else." "You won't," he said firmly. "And even if something doesn't work the way we hope, that doesn't mean we failed. It just means we tried something that mattered." The glow around them intensified, and suddenly understood what was happening. The energy that had been building between them wasn't just emotional. It was biological, cellular, fundamental. Her people had forgotten that reproduction wasn't just about medical procedures and genetic compatibility. It was about connection, about two beings choosing to create something together that neither could create alone. She whispered, "I think I know what's been wrong all along." "What?" "We've been trying to force something that can only happen naturally. The medical procedures, the genetic matching, all of it, we've been so focused on the science that we forgot about the heart." The light around them pulsed brighter, and could feel something shifting in the very air between them. Not just attraction, but a deep recognition of possibility. "So what do we do now?" he asked. Stood and extended her hand to him. Her constellation markings were glowing like actual stars now, and her eyes held a certainty that he'd never seen before. "Now," she said, "we choose each other. Not because we were assigned to each other, not because it's our duty, but because we want to. Because we believe in what we could create together." Took her hand and stood, pulling her close. The moment their bodies touched, the light around them exploded into a brilliant aurora that filled the entire room. Through the walls, other passengers on the ship stopped what they were doing to stare at the impossible beauty of the phenomenon. But and were aware of nothing except each other and the extraordinary force that was building between them. A force that would change everything they thought they knew about compatibility, about love, and about the incredible potential that could emerge when two different worlds chose to become one. 3 months had passed since that transformative night when its connection had manifested as visible light throughout their quarters. The diplomatic vessel had buzzed with gossip for weeks afterward, some claiming it was a malfunction in the ship's lighting systems, others whispering about ancient phenomena that most species had forgotten. But I knew exactly what had happened. In the days following their bonding, had experienced changes that everything medical science understood about her condition. The genetic markers that had proclaimed her infertile began shifting. Her hormone levels, which had been abnormally low for years, started climbing toward normal ranges. Most remarkably, the constellation patterns on her skin, which had been static silver for most of her adult life, now pulsed with warm, golden light whenever was near. "The medical scanners are confused," told one morning as she reviewed the latest readings on her personal device. "According to every test they've ever run, none of this should be possible." Wrapped his arms around her from behind as she sat at their small table, pressing a gentle kiss to the top of her head. The moment he touched her, her skin's patterns flared brighter, and he felt that familiar warm tingling that had become as natural as breathing. "Maybe their tests were incomplete," he suggested. "Maybe they've been looking at fertility as a purely biological function instead of something that involves the whole person." "You sound like the old stories my grandmother used to tell me," said, leaning back against his chest. "She always insisted that the ancient understood reproduction differently, that it required not just genetic compatibility, but spiritual harmony." "What happened to that knowledge?" "Same thing that happened to most of our cultural wisdom. We decided science was more reliable than intuition, that measurable data was more valuable than emotional connection." She turned in his arms to face him. "We were so afraid of our declining birth rates that we threw away everything that might have actually helped us." Their peaceful morning was interrupted by a sharp chime from the communication system. The holographic display activated, revealing the stern face of Admiral, the officer overseeing the diplomatic mission. "Captain Princess, report to Medical Bay 7 immediately. You have 15 minutes." The transmission cut off before either of them could respond, leaving them staring at each other in confusion. "That can't be good," said. Medical Bay 7 turned out to be one of the ship's most advanced facilities, equipped with scanning technology from a dozen different species. As they entered, counted at least 20 medical personnel from various civilizations, all busily operating equipment he couldn't begin to identify. Admiral was waiting for them, along with 3 figures that made breath catch 2 healers in formal robes, and a tall woman whose constellation patterns marked her as high nobility. Aunt whispered. The tall woman stepped forward with fluid grace. She was older than but still striking, with silver hair that seemed to move like liquid metal and constellation patterns that covered nearly her entire body in complex, shifting designs. "Hello, dear one," said, her voice carrying the musical quality typical of Highborn. "I apologize for the dramatic summons, but when the reports reached the Imperial Council, I felt it necessary to investigate personally." "What reports?" asked, though he was beginning to suspect he knew. Admiral gestured to a bank of monitors displaying complex medical readouts. 3 months ago, this vessel's automated health monitoring systems detected an unprecedented bioelectric phenomenon emanating from your quarters. The energy signatures were unlike anything in our databases. "We thought it might be a malfunction," one of the healers added, "until we realized the patterns matched descriptions from ancient texts' descriptions of the resonance bonding that our ancestors believed was necessary for reproduction." Moved closer to, her eyes filled with something that looked like hope mixed with disbelief. "My dear, the energy readings suggest that you and your human partner have achieved something that hasn't been documented in over 1,000 years, if our analysis is correct." "What are you saying?" demanded. "I'm saying that every medical scan we've taken of you in the past 3 months indicates that you are no longer infertile," said gently. "In fact, your biological markers suggest an unprecedented level of reproductive potential." The room fell silent except for the humming of medical equipment. Felt's hand tightened in his, and he could see the constellation patterns on her skin beginning to pulse rapidly. "That's impossible," said. "I've been tested by the best healers in the Empire. My genetic structure has apparently been altered at a fundamental level," one of the medical technicians interrupted, pointing to a holographic display of DNA structures. "The changes are subtle but consistent across every system in your body. It's as if your genetic code has been optimized." Stepped forward, protective instincts flaring. "What exactly are you saying? What kind of changes?" Admiral activated another display showing comparative scans. The human reproductive system, while primitive by most galactic standards, appears to operate on entirely different principles than other species. Your genetic patterns show remarkable adaptability, the ability to harmonize with compatible partners in ways we never thought possible. "You're talking about us like we're lab specimens," said sharply. Raised a hand in a peaceful gesture. "Forgive us. This is unprecedented. In all the since our species joined the galactic community, we've never encountered another race capable of true resonance bonding with." "What does that mean exactly?" asked. "It means," said one of the healers, "that your bond with Captain has activated genetic sequences in your DNA that have been dormant for generations. Sequences that our ancestors possessed but that we thought were lost forever." "More than that," added softly. "If our readings are accurate, you're not just capable of reproduction now. You may be capable of producing offspring that combine the best traits of both species." The implications hit like a physical blow. "You're saying we could have children together? Children that are part human and part—" "We're saying," Admiral replied, "that you may have accidentally discovered the key to solving the fertility crisis, and possibly opened the door to an entirely new form of evolution." Moved to one of the medical displays, studying the genetic readouts with the trained eye of someone who had spent years trying to understand her own reproductive failures. "These changes," she said slowly, "they're not just in my reproductive system. They're affecting my neural pathways, my cellular regeneration rates, even my energy metabolism." "The bonding process appears to be symbiotic," one of the technicians explained. "Captain's genetic patterns show similar modifications, though less dramatic ones. His immune system has been enhanced, his neural processing speed has increased, and his may have been significantly extended." Looked at his own hands as if seeing them for the first time. "Extended how much?" "Possibly to match," said, "which average around 300 years. "This is insane," said, running a hand through his hair. 3 months ago, we were just two people who got thrown together by a diplomatic ceremony. Now you're telling us we've somehow evolved into a new form of life." "Not exactly," the head healer corrected. "You've activated potential that was already there. The capacity for this level of bonding exists in both human and genetics, but it requires very specific conditions to manifest." "What kind of conditions?" asked. "Emotional resonance at a fundamental level," explained. "Complete psychological compatibility, and apparently the kind of genuine affection that transcends species barriers." And looked at each other, and the air around them began to glow softly, a phenomenon that no longer surprised them but clearly fascinated the medical team. "There," Admiral said, pointing at his instruments. "Do you see how the energy patterns synchronize? That level of bioelectric harmony is theoretically impossible between different species." "Unless," said the head healer, "love really is a universal force." Over the following hours, they underwent every test the medical team could devise. The results were consistent. Whatever had happened between them had fundamentally altered both their biologies in ways that enhanced their compatibility. But more than that, the changes seemed to be ongoing, continuing to evolve their bond on a daily basis. "The question now," said as they concluded the testing, "is what happens next. This discovery could revolutionize our understanding of relationships. It could be the answer to fertility crises affecting multiple civilizations across the galaxy. It could also make us the most valuable research subjects in the known universe," said grimly. "How long before every species with a reproduction problem wants to study us, experiment on us, or try to replicate what happened?" "That's precisely why I came personally," admitted. "The Imperial Council is already debating whether to classify this as a state secret or share the information with the galactic community." "It's not their choice to make," said firmly. "This is our life, our bond. We're not going to be anyone's political tools." "I hoped you'd say that," said with a slight smile, "because I have a proposal for you." She activated a holographic display showing a star chart with a single highlighted system. "This is the Sanctuary System, a neutral territory that exists outside the jurisdiction of any empire or federation. It was established centuries ago as a haven for refugees and those seeking to escape political complications." "You want us to go into hiding?" asked. "I want you to have the freedom to explore what you've discovered without interference. To learn how to control and develop your bond without pressure from governments or scientists who see you as a solution to their problems rather than as individuals." Studied the star chart. "What about our obligations here, the diplomatic mission?" "Officially, the mission will continue as planned. You'll be listed as having requested extended personal time for cultural exchange. Unofficially," smile became more genuine, "a transport ship is already waiting to take you to Sanctuary. You can have all the time and privacy you need to understand what you've become." "And what happens if we decide we want to share our discoveries with the galaxy?" asked. "Then you'll do it on your terms when you're ready and with full control over how the information is used." Moved closer to. "My dear, you've spent your entire life being defined by other people's expectations and limitations. This is your chance to define yourself." And exchanged a long look, one of those wordless conversations that had become natural to them. Around them, the soft glow intensified, and several of the medical instruments registered energy spikes. "When would we leave?" asked. "Tonight, if you're willing. The transport captain is human, actually, Captain Sarah Martinez. She's been running refugees to Sanctuary for years and can be trusted completely." "A human captain?" asked with interest. "Humans have proven remarkably adaptable to life in the outer systems," Admiral noted. "Captain Martinez has been operating in neutral space for over a decade." Felt a surge of pride in his species, followed immediately by excitement at the prospect of meeting another human who had made a life among the stars. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think," she said, her constellation patterns pulsing with golden light, "that we've spent enough time being what other people wanted us to be. Maybe it's time to discover what we can become on our own." That evening, as they packed their belongings, found himself thinking about the journey that had brought them to this point. 6 months ago, he'd been a lonely academic who'd volunteered for a diplomatic mission mostly to escape his mundane life on Earth. Had been a disgraced princess, considered worthless by her own people. Now they were something entirely new, a bonded pair whose very existence challenged the scientific understanding of multiple civilizations. They had accidentally become the bridge between two species, and possibly the key to solving fertility crises that threatened the future of entire worlds. "Are you having second thoughts?" asked, noticing his contemplative mood. "Not second thoughts," said, pulling her close. "Just amazement, I guess. Look how far we've come." "We haven't even started yet," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. "Whatever we've discovered, whatever we've become, this is just the beginning." As their transport ship, the Wanderer, prepared for departure, stood with at the observation window, watching the diplomatic vessel shrink into the distance. The stars ahead were unknown, their destination a mystery, their future unwritten. But for the first time in either of their lives, they felt truly free to become whatever they were meant to be. Together, they had already achieved the impossible once. Now they were going to discover just how much more impossible they could become. 8 months had passed since and arrived at Sanctuary Station, and their life had become something neither could have imagined. The station itself was a marvel, a massive orbital habitat constructed from the combined technologies of dozens of species, all refugees or exiles who had chosen freedom over the politics of their home worlds. Captain Sarah Martinez had indeed proven to be trustworthy beyond measure. A former Earth Space Force officer who had left human space after a political disagreement with the colonial administration, she had built a reputation as someone who could get anyone anywhere without questions asked. More importantly, she had become a close friend to both, and helping them navigate the complex social dynamics of a station where dozens of species coexisted. "The morning scans are showing remarkable stability," Dr. Ra observed, reviewing the holographic displays in the medical bay they had established in their quarters. The healer was a member of the synthesis, a species that had voluntarily given up individual bodies to become a collective consciousness inhabiting multiple artificial forms. She had been studying and spawned for months, and her fascination with their unique physiology had never diminished. Stable how? Asked, though he suspected he already knew. Over the past few weeks, both he and had been experiencing new changes, not dramatic ones, but subtle shifts that seemed to be preparing their bodies for something significant. The genetic modifications that began with your initial bonding have reached a state of perfect equilibrium, Dr. Ra explained. Your DNA patterns are now completely synchronized. More importantly, Princess' reproductive system has achieved what we can only describe as optimal functionality. Placed a protective hand over her still flat stomach. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying that all indicators suggest you are approximately 6 weeks into a successful pregnancy. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Felt the world shift around him, and he noticed that constellation patterns had suddenly flared so bright they were visible through her clothing. Pregnant, repeated as if testing the word. We're going to have a child. A child that represents something entirely unprecedented, Dr. Ra continued. The genetic scans we've been able to perform suggest a perfect hybrid combining enhanced human adaptability with longevity and psychic sensitivity. Psychic sensitivity? Asked sharply. The energy fields you both generate have been growing stronger over time. We believe your child will inherit an amplified version of this ability, possibly strong enough to communicate telepathically across species barriers. Sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the implications. A telepathic human hybrid. Do you have any idea what that means for galactic society? It means, said a familiar voice from the doorway, that the galaxy is about to change in ways no one is prepared for. They turned to see Captain Martinez entering, her expression grim but determined. Behind her were 3 figures that made heart leap humans in Earth Space Force uniforms. Sarah said uncertainly, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation, Martinez said. These are Commander David Park, Lieutenant Emma, and Chief Medical Officer Dr. James Wright from the ESF vessel Prometheus. They've been searching for the past 2 months. Commander Park stepped forward, his bearing formal but his eyes kind. Captain, we need to talk. Earth has received some very interesting reports from various galactic sources about human-alien genetic compatibility. Let me guess, said dryly. Someone leaked the information about our bond. Multiple someones, Lieutenant confirmed. There are currently 17 different species trying to arrange diplomatic marriages with humans, and at least 5 governments that want to study you specifically. There's more, Dr. Wright added. Earth's population has been approached by the Galactic Fertility Council. They want to establish a formal breeding program using humans as genetic donors for failing species across the galaxy. Constellation patterns flared angrily. They want to turn humans into breeding stock. Some of the offers are actually quite generous, Commander Park said carefully. Guaranteed citizenship in advanced civilizations, access to technologies that could advance human development by centuries, even territory grants for human colonies. But they all involve treating humans as a resource rather than as individuals with rights, Dr. Wright said bluntly. And they're all based on the assumption that what happened between you two can be replicated with any human-alien pairing. Can it? Dr. Ra asked with scientific curiosity. That's what we're hoping you can tell us, Commander Park said. Earth needs to know what we're dealing with before we respond to these proposals. Looked at and she nodded slightly. The time for hiding was over. The short answer is no, said. What happened between us wasn't just about human compatibility. It was about emotional resonance, psychological harmony, and what can only be described as love at a fundamental level. The long answer, added, is that humans do appear to have unique genetic adaptability. But the kind of bonding we achieved requires very specific emotional conditions that can't be forced or manufactured. However, Dr. Ra interjected, there is evidence to suggest that humans might be compatible with multiple species under the right circumstances. The key factor appears to be genuine emotional connection rather than simple genetic matching. Lieutenant was taking notes on a portable device. So arranged marriages probably wouldn't work, but natural relationships might. It's possible, said. But the galaxy needs to understand that you can't just throw humans at fertility problems and expect miracles. These kinds of bonds require time, trust, and genuine affection. "What about your child?" Dr. Wright asked gently. "What can you tell us about the potential implications?" His hand moved instinctively to her stomach again. "We don't know yet. The pregnancy is still early, and we're learning as we go. But if the genetic projections are accurate, our child will represent something entirely new. A bridge species," added, "capable of bonding with multiple genetic lines, possibly able to communicate across species barriers in ways no one has ever imagined." Commander Park was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. "Captain, I need to ask, are you willing to return to Earth to help us understand how to handle these diplomatic approaches responsibly?" "What about our privacy?" asked. "We came here to avoid becoming political tools." "Earth's position," Lieutenant said, "is that any human who participates in bonding does so voluntarily, with full rights and protections, and maintains complete control over their personal information. Unlike some of the other proposals we've received," Dr. Wright added grimly, and exchanged another of their wordless conversations, the air around them beginning to glow with that familiar warm light. "We'll return," said finally, "but on certain conditions." "Name them," Commander Park said. "First, our child's existence remains classified until we decide otherwise. Second, we maintain the right to approve any research conducted on our bond or our genetic modifications. And third, Earth agrees to establish strict protocols for protecting any humans who choose to enter relationships." "Done," Park said without hesitation. "The Colonial Council has already voted to approve those exact protections." "There's something else you should know," Martinez added. "Word about human adaptability has spread beyond just the fertility-challenged species. Some of the more aggressive civilizations are starting to see humans as potential military assets." "Military assets how?" asked, though he was afraid he already knew. "Enhanced humans bonded with warrior species," Lieutenant explained. "Soldiers with extended, improved physical capabilities and possibly psychic abilities." "They want to weaponize what we've discovered," said flatly. "Which is why Earth needs to get ahead of this," Commander Park said. "We need to establish clear policies about human involvement in galactic affairs before someone tries to make those policies for us." The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks aboard the ESF Prometheus, and it gave them time to prepare for the attention they would inevitably face. Dr. Wright conducted daily medical scans of pregnancy, documenting the remarkable development of their hybrid child. "The growth rate is accelerated compared to normal human gestation," he reported during one of their sessions. "But not dangerously so. It appears the child is developing enhanced neural structures from the very beginning." "Enhanced how?" asked. "Additional neural pathways that don't exist in either human or brains. If our scans are accurate, your child may be born with cognitive capabilities that surpass both parent species." A hybrid mused. "The galaxy really isn't prepared for that, is it?" When they finally reached Earth, the reception was overwhelming. Had expected some attention, but nothing had prepared him for the crowds of reporters, scientists, and government officials who wanted to meet them. Fortunately, the Colonial Council had kept their word about privacy protections. They were housed in a secure facility where they could control their exposure to the media. The scientific consultations, however, were intensive. Earth's best geneticists, anthropologists, and all wanted to understand the implications of human-alien bonding. But to his relief, they approached the research as a collaboration rather than an exploitation. "What we're finding," explained Dr. Sarah, Earth's leading xenobiology expert, "is that humans have a unique genetic flexibility that most species lost as they became more specialized. We retain the ability to adapt and modify our biology in response to environmental pressures, including the environmental pressure of falling in love with someone genetically incompatible," asked with a slight smile. "Especially that," Doctor confirmed. "Love, as it turns out, may be the most powerful evolutionary force in the universe." As pregnancy progressed, the changes in both of them became more pronounced. Found his cognitive abilities had increased dramatically. He could now understand and process information at rates that amazed even him. Psychic sensitivity had grown to the point where she could sense emotions from other people across considerable distances. The bonding process appears to be ongoing, observed Dr. Wright during one of their weekly examinations. You're not just adapting to each other, you're continuing to evolve together. Is that normal? Asked. Nothing about your situation is normal, Dr. Wright said with a grin. But all the changes appear to be positive. Enhanced intelligence, improved physical capabilities, extended and now psychic abilities, if other humans can achieve similar bonds with compatible species. Earth could become the most powerful civilization in the galaxy, finished. Or the most targeted one, added grimly. Their child was born on a quiet Tuesday morning, 7 months after they had returned to Earth. The delivery was attended by the best medical team Earth could provide, along with healers who had traveled from across the galaxy to witness the birth of the first confirmed human-alien hybrid. When Dr. Wright placed their daughter in his arms, the entire room fell silent. She was beautiful beyond description, clearly human in basic structure, but with subtle features and constellation patterns that pulsed gently across her skin in soft gold and silver. Her eyes, when they opened, were a brilliant amber that seemed to hold depths of intelligence no newborn should possess. "Hello, little star," whispered, and the child's constellation patterns flared brighter, as if responding to his voice. "She's remarkable," breathed Doctor, studying the readings from the medical equipment. "Her neural activity is already showing patterns we've never seen before." "What does that mean?" asked, exhausted but alert as she reached for her daughter. "It means," said one of the healers softly, "that you have given birth to something entirely new, a being capable of bridging not just two species, but potentially all species." As if in response to the healer's words, the child made a soft sound, not quite a cry, but something that every person in the room somehow understood as contentment. The universal translators worn by the various species present all registered the sound as meaning safe and loved, regardless of their programming. "She's communicating," Dr. Wright said in amazement. "Telepathically, with everyone in the room, regardless of species." Looked down at his daughter, then at, and felt a profound sense of responsibility settling over him. They had created not just a child, but potentially the first member of a new species, one that could communicate with any sentient being in the galaxy. "What have we done?" he asked quietly. "You've given the galaxy hope," said the healer. "In a universe where species are growing apart, where fertility is declining and conflicts are increasing, you've proven that different peoples can come together to create something greater than either could achieve alone." 3 months later, Azan stood in the nursery watching their daughter sleep. They reflected on how much their lives had changed. The infertile princess and the lonely human had become the parents of what many were already calling the child of stars, a being who represented the potential for unity in a galaxy that had almost forgotten how to hope. Outside their window, Earth continued its work of establishing new protocols for relationships. 3 more human-alien couples had already reported successful bonding, and early reports suggested that with proper emotional connection, humans might indeed be compatible with dozens of different species. "Do you think we did the right thing?" asked, watching their daughter's constellation patterns pulse gently in her sleep. "I think," said, pulling her close, "that we did the only thing we could do. We loved each other, and everything else followed from that." Their daughter stirred in her sleep, and both parents felt a warm presence touch their minds, not words, but pure emotion conveying safety, love, and infinite possibility. The galaxy had handed them to each other as a joke, never imagining that 2 failures could create something that would reshape the understanding of what was possible. But sometimes the greatest discoveries came from the most unexpected places, and sometimes the future of the universe rested in the hands of those who had been deemed unworthy by others, and had proven that love really could conquer the impossible. Now their daughter would have the chance to show the galaxy what could be built on that foundation. The age of true unity was just beginning, and it had all started with a human and an alien who chose to see each other not as failures, but as infinite potential waiting to be realized.